It is Monday, April 26th, 2021. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was yet another non-virtual, get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Monday. Loved it. Loved it. Got my ass kicked to fuck. Managed to get one of my very, very favorite submissions, though. And it's only my favorite because I've gotten it like 3 times, and and it's one of those really unexpected ones. Traditionally, when people go for an Americana, they tend to want to put their elbow in your ear first with their left arm and close it out by, grabbing you by the wrist with that arm, and then running their right arm through, grabbing their own wrist, and then rotating it up, right? That's the traditional way to do it. However, I've noticed that if I get myself in the right position, typically if I can get my foot up onto like if I have my left foot, if I have my left foot on top of their right hip, right? I'm on top, right? And I've got my arm under their neck, and I'm reaching all the way through as far as I can until I can get a hold of that wrist. And see, I've noticed that when I have somebody in that position, and it looks like I'm trying to isolate the arm for maybe an arm and head triangle, an arm triangle. But the difference is this, though, that like you would have your opponent in a gable grip, so assume they've got you in half guard. And this is the position that I really like to do it in because they're concentrated on trying to resume their guard, and get in a positive position, because half guard from the bottom, it's not really an aggressive position. You have to make adjustments from there in order to make it into an offensive position. And so what I did was this, that I brought my foot up as close as I could to his butt. He's still holding me in half guard, right? And I've got that arm up over his shoulder and under his neck. And he's flailing that left arm around, trying to avoid me capturing it, right? But he got a little lackadaisical when I put my arm back behind his neck. I mean, I had it on the one side of his head, and he's like, "Oh, I know where this is going." So he's like really avoiding it. So, but he started to rotate into me, and so I swapped it back to where I had my hand or my arm back around his neck, and kind of flattening him back out again. And this time, when I did that, I pressed down with my chest on his arm. And he flattened his arm out on the ground, in a 90-degree angle. I captured his wrist with the hand that I had under his neck. And again, this is not a traditional position for assuming an Americana, but it is possible. And the way I did it was I pulled it tight to where I'm kind of crushing down on his head with my shoulder. And I'm making sure that when I grabbed his wrist, I'm pushing down on his wrist so that his hand buckles and the back of his hand is on the ground. And it's very, very important. You have to have the back of their hand on the ground if you're going to try and get an Americana this way. So I flattened it out and I pulled it in tight, and then I reached in, grabbed my wrist, and it was just a slight rotation from there. And if you try and do that to your own arm, I mean, you can't do it. You can't do it on your own. And if somebody did it to you, it would be really rough. And anyway, so I managed to get it on that, and I was very, very happy because, again, it's not a traditional way to do it, and sometimes I think it's a bad habit to even reach for it. Because, I mean, the chances of you actually getting them flattened down enough to be able to assume that Americana on them it's pretty low. It's a lower percentage than if you were to stuff your elbow in their ear, pin their head between, your thigh and your tricep there, to where you practically have a what do you call it? What would I call that? Not an Americana. What's that choke? It's kind of like a Darce choke. Like if you were to sprawl from there, you could probably get a good Darce choke in there. Like if you get your arm up around their armpit and keep their head stuffed under your armpit, and then lock that in with a kind of a triangle shape, that you might be able to get it. I almost got an arm in guillotine today, and did I get an arm in guillotine? I came really close to getting an arm in guillotine. I had my arm under his neck. The trick was closing it out, and I think my biggest problem there was I didn't have the right grip. There's certain grips, like if you do an S grip, your knuckles will be pointed up and into their chest, and so when you're pulling them to you and you're pinching your elbows down for that guillotine, your knuckles are going to be going right into their chest there, and it helps them make their decision to tap. But anyway, so yeah, it was a productive class. As far as, and that was actually the second half. I just did 10 minutes of the advanced class, and basically we were doing positional sparring from the half guard, in top half guard. And no, well, yeah, actually, there was a leg in. Or, I'm trying to think if it was it half guard? I think it was just top position, but I could be mistaken there. Like if you had your arm up under their, side control, that's what it was. We were starting from side control. And I pulled off some neat stuff. I managed to get my opponent back in my guard, and I was working toward a triangle when the bell rang. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I haven't done a lot of positional sparring in a while, and I like the format because it does give you a little more time, I think, to think things out. But I don't know. I was working with two really big guys, so they tend to operate a little bit slower than some of the individuals that I was working with before, but they're very, very skilled. Both guys, I would one of them I know was a blue belt in the gi before he transferred over. So, there's that level of competency to deal with, and plus he was a little bit bigger than me too. So, but I managed to get that Americana on him, and I gotta wonder if he thought about it, and he's like, "Oh, his arm's behind my head. You can't get an Americana from here." I mean, if that really occurred to him, man, that would make me laugh. But anyway, so it was a productive class. As far as the material we covered today, it was starting off. If you were coming in for a knee slice, and you're kind of like backed off and then put into a triangle. And that was one thing that we did. And there were a few other things that we did that I have a little bit of trouble remembering at this moment. But yeah, I think the last thing that we did was going for a triangle. And there were a few adjustments I had to make to it in order to close out that triangle. But I was able to nonetheless. And there was one thing I neglected to do that I wish I would have remembered to do, and that's on this particular triangle setup. You force their leg back, you get your feet up on their hips, and then you bring your right leg up over their shoulder, and you close out that actually. Yeah, it was a triangle. There's another one that we were doing where it's a arm bar, and it's that reverse arm bar to where you've got your opponent's arm rotated basically upside down, and you've got their wrist tucked in between your neck and your shoulder. and you're rotating that elbow over and pulling it to you. And that particular one, I managed to secure that one pretty darn tight. And it's funny because you can continue to get that one as you roll over. So like if your opponent is like trying to roll away from you, you can continue to do things to that particular grip that make it even more secure. And one of the things that I really like to do is reach all the way around the arm to where I'm hooking my fingers on the inside of their bicep. You know, in that gap on the inside of your elbow. That's where I like to rotate my hand around to and hook my fingers in that and then rotate it to the outside. And if you do that, they can't rotate their arm back. You know, if you get that twisted up right, it doesn't matter, man. You pull it just a little bit and they got to tap, because otherwise you're going to break that fucking arm. But yeah, it was really interesting. I got it in a couple of positions that weren't necessarily what we were being instructed to do, but nonetheless they were very, very effective. And like I said, I think if I were in a position to do them in a normal sparring match or in a competition, that's exactly how I would want to do it. But yeah, like I said, it was a productive day. I started off 3 pounds lighter than I ended last week, so that's a little bit of relief on my mind, because I've been picking up weight. And one of my friends, a close friend of mine, he told me that he had adjusted his sleeping habits, and I always forget about sleep as far as a weight loss or metabolism affecting kind of thing. But it's very, very important that you get consistent rest, and specifically more than 6 hours of continuous sleep. You know, and it doesn't matter when you manage it, but 6 continuous hours, you know, just one 6-hour slot minimum. And that'll be good for at least weight maintenance. But I tried to get more sleep this last weekend, where, you know, I have this terrible habit of playing GTA 5 until God knows when, but it's because I'll get with a good crew and we'll just run missions for like an hour or so and just gank out on fucking caffeine all night long. But anyway, so yeah, I've been trying to back away from that and get back to some normal sleeping hours. And yeah, that's one of the reasons I was thinking about adjusting the hours of the show. You know, like doing it from like 2 to 5 or something like that. I think that would probably expose the show to more people, for one thing. You know, because more people are up. I mean, a lot of people are getting ready to go to sleep right now. At least responsible people, respectable people are getting ready to go to sleep right now. And so we kind of want to cater to those people, you know. They're starting to get involved in crypto now, and so maybe they need to hear that Alex Jones type of voice. And I think that would probably be in Alex Jones' same slot, that 2 to 5 slot, or I don't know. He does a slot somewhere in between there, if it's like 4 to 5 or 3 to 5 or something like that. Anyway, point being, thinking about doing that, because if I ended out the show at 5 o'clock, then I would be able to regularly attend the evening class and the advanced class. And I think that's one of the things I need to do, because I mean, my jiu-jitsu is feeling better this week. I felt more capable of dealing with my opponents, at least. And I don't know if that was because they were just being nice to me or what. But anyway, I felt a lot more capable today. I felt a little more with it. And I got to think that the increased sleep is helping. And I'm sure it's helping with the dropping of the weight, or at least keeping it off, keeping it from accumulating. But yeah, so like I said, I started off 3 pounds lighter than I ended out last week, so that was an instant fucking happy dance for me inside. And then to go out there and do as well as I did. I think I only tapped once, and we did like 10 1-minute rounds. And Yeah. Yeah. I didn't do all 10. It was 3 of us, and one of us had to rotate out every 1 minute. So, so for 3 minutes, we would be rolling for 2 of them. Whether it be top position or bottom position, for every 3 minutes, we would be doing 2 minutes of rolling. And like I said, I think I did some interesting stuff. I think I remembered some interesting stuff. Yeah, it was a productive session. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down with some music. And we're gonna start off with body count because we're just gonna do it. We're just gonna do it. But which song? Well, I love this song, and I've been trying to avoid playing it because, according to my list here, I've played it probably more than any other song. But here it is, Carnivore, First Dance, here on Coin Metal. I was gonna let it run, but I'm not gonna. It was Anthrax with The Constant. Anyway, as far as what we're gonna get into today, got some business at hand, and the first one I wanted to get into, I'm kind of flipping back and forth between a few because I got some humdingers here. I think I want to start with this one because on its face it just seems so utterly ridiculous to me that I have to delve into it. I just have to. Here it is. And it's on CoinDesk. Time is running out to win the blockchain race. I'm not even going to go into how retarded that sounds to me. Anyway, continuing on. This is by Paul Brody. It was authored today, April 26, 2021 at 10:36 a.m. PDT. So yes, penis. History is full of companies that missed out on big technological changes. Many of them thought they were carefully timing their participation in the market, but I believe they may have been looking at the wrong measures of adoption and consequently made the wrong decisions. That pattern is about to repeat itself with blockchain. The issue here is that when it comes to the technology, the battle over standards and market leadership is usually decided before mass adoption. And Paul, who is there to decide for you what standards you will employ in your cryptocurrency project? I'm waiting, Paul. I'm waiting. What? No answer? Nobody? That's what I fucking thought. Jesus Christ, dude. There isn't a fucking regulator out there that can sit over your shoulder and say, you can't do that with your code. You gotta do it this way. That is defining a standard. Anyway, continuing on. The result is that by the time most companies notice that the market is entering a mass adoption phase, it's too late to change the course of the market. The market for personal computers arguably started in 1977. A decade later, in 1987, less than 15% of all American households had a personal computer, but by then, Microsoft Windows was the market leader with more than half the market. Great perspective from Simco.com here, and here. And I just wanted to take a step aside there. For one thing, market leader is kind of subjective. It would depend on which market we're talking about. Are we talking about the industrial market? Are we talking about the consumer market? Continuing on. Let's see. Paul Brody is EY's global blockchain leader. Okay, whatever that is. The pattern repeated itself in the smartphone category. Nokia can be said to have kicked off the market with the Symbian ecosystem in 2000. Email-focused smartphones followed in 2003, and then touch-based smartphones in 2007. By 2011, even though adoption was still less than about 20% of the market, we already had the same two market leaders we know today. Yeah, Linux. The pattern appears to have largely repeated itself in the world of cloud computing and network systems, even though both markets are largely based on open source technologies and well understood published standards. They remain dominated by the original leaders even after decades of determined and big spending competition. The market leader in networks has a 50% share, and the market leader in cloud has a 32% share. You know what, dude? What relevance is that? Big fucking whoop-de-doo. They got a whole bunch of market share. What does that really mean? Anyway, continuing. And so there is a lesson here for the world of blockchain. Time is running out. That's true for alternative blockchains, for legacy players, for everyone who isn't already knee-deep in this business to become a serious player. Dude, you're so full of shit. Depending on the starting point you select, Bitcoin in 2009 or Ethereum in 2015, we are 7 to 12 years into this market development. Estimates vary, but more reliable ones point to between 8% and 10% of all Americans already own some cryptocurrency. The window to create a partnership position or a leadership position seems to close around 10 to 12 years after a market is created, and so that time is near, if it hasn't already arrived. Quote, the most astonishing aspect about market leadership in technology is how little it depends on the technology itself. Yeah, whatever. You guys full of shit. Just how close are we to the end of the game can be hard to discern in the day-to-day fog of competitive warfare. Between 1985 and 1990, you wouldn't have been in bad company if you had picked up a Commodore Amiga, as I did, or an Atari ST. In the mid-2000s, you were similarly in good company if you had eschewed out complicated touchscreens for the reliability of a smartphone with keys. Not only would you have been in good company for choosing different smartphones or PCs, you would have also been right in pointing out the enormous flaws in the market leaders. A black and white PC in 1985? Only 640 kilobytes of memory? The same kinds of absurdities can be found in the world of blockchain. The carbon footprint for Bitcoin and the transaction gas fees, the fee required to successfully conduct a transaction on Ethereum, can only be described as obscene. Yeah, that's because of block size limits. Fuck you. These problems did not destroy their ecosystems, however. They got fixed. No, they didn't. Often imperfectly, and with much grumbling, and people moved on. No, they haven't. When PCs with extended memory arrived, the solution was criticized as a clumsy workaround. People bought them in huge numbers anyway. Expect roughly the same reception to any, quote, solution to Bitcoin's carbon footprint. Whatever. I believe the dominant players in the world of blockchain are clearly visible now as well. No, they're not. Bitcoin represents a bigger market capitalization than every other blockchain combined and appears to be on track to become the preferred digital store of value. Likewise, Ethereum has more developers than any other blockchain combined and is similarly on track to becoming the preferred economic infrastructure for the next generation of developers. No, it isn't. At the same time, companies like Aave, Binance, Coinbase, and Compound Labs are busy staking out the high ground in this ecosystem around specific value propositions. Yeah, they might be. I've spent 5 years at EY, Ernst & Young. You know what? That's why he's not saying it. It's Ernst & Young. These guys have been trying to establish themselves as some sort of experts in cryptocurrency, that they can evaluate a cryptocurrency project from outside and tell you whether or not it's going to be successful or useful or make money or profitable or whatever. And he's full of shit. Continuing on. I've spent 5 years at Ernst & Young doing everything I can to make sure that we don't just participate in this market, but that we lead it. Yeah, you fucking idiot. I don't think I will know if we succeeded for another decade. Yeah, you're never going to succeed. Actually, I could tell you right now what Ernst & Young is going to do. In 2 years or so, Ernst & Young is going to be considered like the Moody's of cryptocurrency, where they're going to be AA rating, AAA rating, double D rating, whatever, cryptocurrency projects, and then getting bribes from developers and whatnot to give favorable ratings. And by then, nobody will even be bothering to look at it because they'll be just saying, oh man, Ernst & Young says it's good shit. And then by the 4th year, they will be like doing CryptoKitties and shit like that. Or they'll be doing NFTs that don't have any real anchoring. And what can 404 at any fucking time, right? and that's exactly the role that they're supposed to play. They're supposed to play the Moody's in the cryptocurrency apocalypse. I used to call it the GR Bufu because I had assumed that Ripple would be the catalyst. And I wasn't far off, because we're already into the territory where we're circulating valueless tokens in the stead of things that do have value because they were mined and they weren't just issued or just created. They actually had to have somebody behind them with a computer and with computing power. Continuing on. If there's one final reason to act with urgency, it's not just that the window for market leadership is closing, it is also unlikely to reopen. Dude, you're so full of shit. There were better operating systems back in 1987 than the market leaders, and that was also true in 2000, in 2010, and 2020. And you know what? People that know the difference, use them. The most astonishing aspect about market leadership in technology is how little it depends on the technology itself. There's always something better out there. The strength of the platform may have started in the technology, but in the end, it is much more driven by the total investment, the installed base, the developer community, and the assumption that it's all going to remain a constant, which it isn't. Anyway, continuing on. In the next year or two, you can expect many technology and financial services companies to explain their plans to enter the blockchain market. In nearly every case, they will cite the low penetration of the technology in their industry or market as evidence that it's, quote, early days yet, and they have plenty of time to formulate their strategy and leverage their legacy market position. It isn't. They don't. This guy's a fucking idiot. Here we go. The views reflected in this article are the view of the author and do not necessarily reflect the views of the global Ernst & Young organization or its member firms. Yeah, dude, this guy's full of shit. Anyway, so how to unravel all of this shit? For one thing, let's just say it, that all of the companies that have put forward patents on cryptocurrency projects, thinking that they are going to be able to sue projects out of existence, are going to find out that they are going to lose. And this is because 99.99999% of everything that they put out is based on open source prior work. At least part, if not in whole. And this is the thing, is that they'll, like a MasterCard will try and take people to court over their bullshit patents that they put forward if your project kind of mimics what they do, right? if you become worth enough to go after, even if you are just a loose conglomeration of developers and other participants, if you start pushing around, tens of billions of dollars, they might want to be coming and talking to you about maybe going to court over the fact that you're using technology that's copied from them. It's based on their work, and it's not. All the tools were just laying around. These fucking people conglomerated them into their little projects, and then they throw them to the patent office and a few $1 million, and they get their little patent submitted and included, right? And you can't do that, and you can't afford the lawyers to fight them. But the thing is by the time they decide to go after you, because your cost profile is so much lower than theirs, you are going to be able to take them down. They're going to have their cadre of lawyers, and you're going to have the MIT license. You're going to have the GNU license. You're going to be able to say, hey, yo, all this shit, or I'm sorry, GPL? Yeah, General Public License. I'm sorry. I get all that shit confused. Anyway, point being that there are plenty of public standards that you can preserve your intellectual property with. And if they bother to come after you, you say, look, I did my stuff I based it off of this. I cite it here in my documentation. I did this guy, and I copied this guy, and one of our other developers copied this guy. All of this stuff is open source DLLs. All of it is open source and available to the public to use for free, except with attribution. So you can just, find something to suck on and put it in your mouth. Not necessarily my dick, but, it's there. Anyway, so, this guy about, time is running out to win the blockchain race. Look, fool, I'm expecting any day now that kids, the ages that first got involved in this, like Ethereum, just give you an example. Vitalik started working on Ethereum when he was 17 years old. Or I don't know if that's true. It's either 17 or 19. I don't know. But he was really fucking young. He was a kid. A literal kid. Right now, he's one of the most powerful people on the planet. Why? Because he's leading the development team for Ethereum, the second largest cryptocurrency by market capitalization, the first largest if you consider the totality of market capitalization that is sitting on top of it. All the little token projects out there, the ERC20 tokens, the ICO tokens, all that shit is worth hundreds of billions of fucking dollars. And it's all piggybacked on top of Ethereum. It's one of the things that makes it so fucking preposterous to me that they even contemplate the idea of transferring over to proof of stake while they got all that shit going live. It's just... It's like if you were to take every single crypto hack that's happened, and I don't care which one, some that were internal, some that were external, whatever, all of them, and accumulate all their market capitalization. I don't care how you're assessing it, by even including Mt. Gox, which was hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. If you were to take all of it and put it together, this is going to eclipse it. That if they do make this transition over to proof of stake, that it's going to increase the level of liability because of the lack of security of proof of stake versus proof of work, and the subjective nature of a lot of it. I expect it to fail fabulously, and in the process, the DAO hack would just be fucking drop in the bucket. It would just be nothing. Anyway, continuing on. Next thing I got here is on Coindesk.com. Plutocracy is still bad. Proposed EOS overhaul confirms. And this is Let's see. Hate to say I told you so was the subtitle there. And this is by Brady Dale, and it was authored on April 26, 2021 at 10:13 a.m. PDT. So yes, penis. I have been writing about EOS, once a top 10 blockchain, now in the top 30 since before the network launched. By and large, EOS token holders have disliked my reporting. Every time I put out a new post, it would get roundly critiqued as FUD, and then even occasionally attacked, specifically by Block.one founder Brendan Bloomer. Quote, this article is excerpted from the Node, CoinDesk's daily roundup of the most pivotal stories in blockchain and crypto news. You can subscribe or get the full newsletter here. Let's see, this is a tweet. Herman Arbor says, he's actually retweeting your tweets, Brendan. He is not only not worried for losing his credibility, but he is actually proud of misleading CoinDesk readers. CoinDesk should take note if they want to call themselves a professional media outlet. And Brendan Bloomer says, there's no intention of professionalism or truth here. I don't see any. He pasted something else into this. Let's see if we can expand the whole thing. Let's see what it's worth here. To Brady Dale, subject clarification sought. Hi Brady, in reference to your recent CoinDesk article, quote, Block.one will not launch its social network on EOS. We wanted to clarify the following and request that the headline on the article be updated. Quote, Block.one will not launch its social network on EOS is misleading, as you cite in your article. While Voice is in its current technical beta phase, it will be on a multi-purpose made EOS IO blockchain. We have said that over time, we would like to leverage the EOS public blockchain and potentially others. And let's see, what's the other one here? I guess this is like some sort of response subject RE clarification sought to Block.one media at Block, or media at Block.one. I think it's dead on. Keep on. Interesting. So, let's see what the thread here says. Someday communication like this will be on blockchain. Voice. Interesting. So, yeah, we got that part. What no one ever did, though, was show where any of my reporting was substantively wrong on the facts. In fact, on occasion, members of the community would admit that the facts had been correct, even if they pointed to an uncomfortable truth. What did happen, though, was I would put out a report on some facet of EOS that would frustrate its proponents. I would ignore the blockchain for a while, usually until someone in the ecosystem would bring something to my attention. More often than not, I would hear voices that had once decried my past, quote, FUD, now decrying EOS or its creators. And in fact, a new proposal from Block.one seems to implicitly acknowledge a number of points made in my past reporting. The proposal for stake-based voting and rewards on EOS basically follows the model that blockchains like Cosmos and Cardano use, and that Ethereum has been working to deploy, sharing block rewards directly with users who stake to support validators, like Bitcoin's miners on the network. As of now, EOS holders can stake their EOS to vote for a slate of block producers, BPs, what EOS calls validators. They could vote for as few as 1 and as many as 30. All their tokens vote equally for all the block producers a voter supports. Further, voting is basically continuous. The top 21 block producer candidates automatically share a quarter of the annual inflation, i.e., new supply, of new EOS distributed with each block. Some of the rest went to other block producer candidates who contributed to the network in other ways. The original plan had also included some inflation for developing the network, but it turned out no one really cared about that, so it was all burned. So let's go through the proposal and point out how it squares with the concerns raised in my prior reporting. Each of the bolded parts below are straight from the post linked above. Quote, proposal. We are proposing a staking pool system that can directly reward token holders in exchange for their vote, required, and securing the network. This is the key change. Everyone who stakes and votes gets rewarded for doing so. When EOS kicked off, there was this high-minded idea that the block producers who did the best work for the network, not just validating, but developing apps and tools, would get the votes to earn the most rewards. That is not what happened at all, though, and the hardest working block producers started leaving the network in frustration. Instead, block producers started paying people for their votes, something Ethereum creator Vitalik Buterin had predicted would happen on his blog. As early EOS supporters left and new ones came into this new regime, the viewpoint on this reality went from being a bit of an embarrassing truth to becoming something Block.one's CEO described as aligning the validators with token holders. So instead of block producers offering stakers specific deals for backing them, under this new vision, the network itself would pay wallets that participate in governance, if the proposal is adopted. Proposal: to reduce this gap, we are proposing the removal of BPay rewards and instead propose to distribute all rewards through VPay. Proposal: to help facilitate a healthy distribution of VPay rewards, all votes must include 21 block producer candidates. Under the current system, a quarter of inflation goes to the top 21 block producers automatically, the ones who have complete power over the network consensus, and the rest gets distributed to pretty much everyone who has users voting for them pro rata. Most of that goes to the top 21 too. So, EOS proposes stripping out that automatic carve-out and distributing it all pro rata, assuming the leading BPs will still get most of the payout anyway. To me, this reads as an acknowledgement that frequently the BPs doing the most work for the network aren't actually the ones in the top 21. The ones earning the most were the BPs backed by whales, turning their large holdings into even more EOS. Proposal: we are proposing that block producers who underperform or fail to produce blocks at their designated time will create a penalty effect that decreases the total inflation in the system. This was a real black mark of the prior system. Many of the BPs just weren't validating blocks. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, but the system aligned them so poorly with the network that blocks would get missed all of the time. Check out the data on Aloha EOS reliability tracker. One entrepreneur told us he had to completely revise his code strategy for an EOS-based app because he couldn't trust it to do what he needed from block to block. So under this new approach, the entire system would be punished if blocks are missed. The theory is it will give all voters an incentive to support BPs who won't miss blocks, which seems obvious. This is only a proposal, of course, and Block.one doesn't directly have the power to impose it on EOS. However, if it does move through without much difficulty, there's a good chance that the network will do much better. That could be good, but it will illuminate one more issue that has hung over the network from the start. Most crypto true believers have already thought 21 organizations was much too few for a truly decentralized blockchain. But the progress of this proposal could reveal that the number is smaller still. That really just one organization has the power in EOS, and that's Block.one itself. Yeah. And this is always the risk with proof-of-stake systems. And I think it's the danger that most people that oppose the transition of Ethereum to proof-of-stake are contemplating. They're looking at how it's working out in other proof-of-stake systems, and they're like, dude, these things are wholly perverse. They're wholly perverted, they're wholly corrupted, and we don't really need to entertain this level of risk. And we really shouldn't, given the market cap of all of the projects that are dependent upon Ethereum functioning as a network. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw back down with some music. But where to go? Played a lot of good stuff last time. I don't think we did play any Megadeth. I think we can do that one. So, here we go. Hook in Mouth by Megadeth, here on Coin Metal. And that was 12-Foot Ninja with Kingdom. Man, that was actually a little bit longer than I had anticipated. However, we did kind of stop a little bit later than I anticipated too, so. Anywho, continuing on. Wanted to get into that one. I got a whole bunch that are lined up here, so. I think that misconception that got just kind of threw me for a loop. Anyway, I did have this other thing I wanted to kind of get into. I'd actually seen growing interest among the quote-unquote normies in my life concerning cryptocurrency, where they're getting interested in owning and trading cryptocurrency. And it's a dangerous thing, recommending such things to relatives, because many of them do not understand. They don't have the same context that you do. And so it's very difficult to assess the totality of everything that you have to educate them on, and that they have bothered to educate themselves on. So anyway, I got this thing here. It's on bitshills.com. Simple Bitcoin explanation: the most undervalued asset in human history. Now, I'm going to stop right here and say this person may or may not be fully ideologically driven and not entirely technologically savvy at all. Anyway, continuing. This is authored on February 17th, 2021, and it was by Smiley Gnome. So, I'm going to assume yes. Penis. Imagine a gold coin with every gold transaction in human history written on it and guaranteed to be 100% confirmed true and immutable. It would be the Library of Alexandria of banking. That one gold coin would be the most valuable banking instrument ever devised in human history. That's where Bitcoin's value is derived from. No, it isn't. That's why, because it was first, it will always be regarded as the ultimate history book. No, it won't. Bitcoin is a digital ownership with a digital transaction record that goes all the way back to the first transaction. Think of it as a digital real estate. A Bitcoin does not physically exist in the USA and Germany, but when someone in Germany buys a portion of a Bitcoin from someone in the USA, the person in the USA sends the deed/title key to the German's possession, due to an agreed upon price on market. You could also think of it as a car key, and the car is a bank. In order to drive the car, operate the bank, you need a key. That is the Bitcoin. I'm done with this key. Would you like to buy it? The transfer of ownership does not require third parties, such as states and banks. It is completely voluntary. You cannot be forced to give up your Bitcoin without extreme violence or a $5 wrench attack. They could hold a gun to the head of every human on Earth and force them to cough up their Bitcoin keys, but let us be realistic. Why not? They did that with gold. Quote, what Bitcoin keys, I would ask? Lost them in a boating accident. It does not require digital real estate agents licensed by the state. It's peer-to-peer, person-to-person, a decentralized collective of voluntary networks working together towards the common goal of prosperity. Actually, no, just accuracy. We're just trying to be accurate. That Bitcoin is a hectare of land on the digital globe known as the blockchain. No. Okay. Now we're jumping off into the woods here. You notice I've been mispronouncing the word blockchain? There's a reason for that. See, there have been a number of waves of people trying to get you to misunderstand exactly what Bitcoin is, what the blockchain is. Bitcoin is the product of miners, individuals such as yourself, running hardware that is designed specifically and solely to do one thing, and that is mine Bitcoin or other proof-of-work cryptocurrency, and according to only certain algorithms. They're optimized for certain algorithms. Anyway, continuing on with that, the network out there, when they're processing, their whole job out there is to receive and process and include the transactions they receive into a block of 10 minutes of transactions. Now, this block is artificially limited in size by a parameter called the block size limit. It keeps the Bitcoin network processing approximately 1.3 megabytes worth of transactions every 10 minutes. This is an artificial limitation that's been imposed specifically, I believe anyway, to drive people off chain, to make it so that in order for you to do a on-chain transaction, you have to pay what is known as a transaction fee. And this fee is what motivates the miners to include your transaction in the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, previously, the way it worked was all of the transactions that happened over a 10-minute period were included in a block. Beginning, end, block reward, everybody happy. And if you want more on that, read the Bitcoin white paper. They were supposed to be processing transactions in an as received, meaning that there's a timestamp server that's included in all of this, and it marks those transactions, or the transaction time is included as a parameter of note on the transaction. And so when the rest of the network receives that transaction from the first node, from when that node propagates it back out to the network, there are timestamps involved, and it tells the rest of the network when it happened. And this gives it a chronological means of ordering the transactions within a block in an as-received manner. Now, this whole aspect of Bitcoin has been all fucked up, and they've replaced it with a quote-unquote fee market, where if you want to get your transaction included in a block now, as in the next block, you're going to pay a big ass fee. And at last check, the average fee was $50. Now, that is an average. That doesn't mean all of the transaction fees were $50 or more, or there were many that were much less. But there's like a gradient where, if you wanted to include it in the next block or in this block coming up, you have to pay $50. Now, if it's okay with you if you wait 2 hours for your first confirmation, which was supposed to happen in 10 minutes, if you're willing to wait for the 2 hours, 12 blocks, then it'll be reduced down to about $20. If you're willing to wait 50 blocks, now that's just a possibility that your transaction is going to wait around 50 blocks before it's included in a block. That's a possibility. There's also a possibility that the miners will include it sooner or later. You don't know. See, it fucks up the whole idea of Bitcoin. That again, the transactions are supposed to be included as received. And this is what gives its immutability, is that the miners just include the fucking transaction. They don't discriminate the transaction, unless it's, of course, an invalid transaction format. Then it's just like, that's bullshit. And it doesn't get propagated through the network. Anyway, continuing on. I have to sort that out for people because people keep flinging around this word blockchain like it means something. The blockchain itself is completely fucking meaningless unless you want to check the validity of a transaction or the path of the funds as it went from one transaction to another. And you can do that on the blockchain. But that's the extent of its use. And I mean, that's terribly useful on a subjective level, for any individual business. But it's relatively useless. I mean, unless you're just analyzing the transactions for some sort of metadata corollary or whatever. But it's relatively meaningless. And they keep concentrating on the blockchain. Dude, the blockchain just says your fucking transaction was valid, was included in a block, and the rest of the network knows about it and has included it in their database of transactions that have happened previously. But they harp on this word blockchain as though it's very, very meaningful and that it's the ruling arbiter, right? It's the exhaust of the network. The network is processing the transactions and including them in blocks. The result is the quote-unquote blockchain. That's it. There's no big magic involved here. Continuing. That Bitcoin is a... Yeah, we already read that part. The miners and the nodes are notaries, and the currency of Bitcoin itself is the oil, blood of the network. Oh, by the way, non-economical nodes are completely useless, except for if you want to try and control what the miners receive as far as network formats go. Anyway, continuing on. Your Bitcoin address is much like an email. It is the destination you give someone to send the digital property ownership of the Bitcoin to. Actually, your public address, not your Bitcoin address, your public address. You get two keys, your public address and your private address. You don't give people your private address. I mean, unless you're going to give them like all of your Bitcoin, you don't give them your fucking private key, because then they can take ownership of your Bitcoin. You give them your public key in order to send you funds. Anyway, continuing on. One Bitcoin is 1.0. If I say I'm going to send you Bitcoin, it could be any amount down to 0.0000001 BTC. When you get down to the satoshis of Bitcoin, we like to refer to them as satoshis after Bitcoin's creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. Think of a currency as water, current, that runs in a river between two banks, except with cryptocurrency, there is no need for banks. You are the river bank. Exchanges are the island in the middle, which make it easier finding the other side. All cryptocurrency exchanges are like stock exchanges, forex currency exchanges, but are cheaper to use and operate. Cryptocurrency exchanges are centralized hubs built for they're not necessarily centralized hubs. Anyway, continuing, for users to trade again amongst each other. There currently exists and will continue to advance in the marketplace exchanges that are decentralized. These exchanges will operate much like Bitcoin. They will be run by everybody, not just one centralized company or person. Decentralized exchanges are continuing to gain popularity due to the principle that you only need one decentralized point in a centralized system to fail. This makes centralized systems less secure than decentralized systems. Bitcoin is called cryptocurrency because it is secured through a form of mathematics known as cryptography. Banks and businesses use this today to secure money and information. With Bitcoin, cryptography is used to encrypt a wallet, ensure no one can use funds without a password, make it impossible to use another person's wallet, or corrupt the blockchain with malicious transactions. Actually, the miners do that. Malicious transactions such as the double spend could cripple an economy. It's a form of counterfeiting where a user attempts to send Bitcoin to two different addresses at the same time. This is made impossible due to miners using cryptography to confirm transactions. Actually, it used to be made impossible by the timestamp server. Anyway, continuing. These confirmations are needed to ensure that the transaction won't be reversed. After about 6 confirmations, it's mathematically impossible to reverse them. It means this transaction is etched in digital stone on a digital hectare of the blockchain globe. Being written on the blockchain is better than being written in stone. No, not necessarily. You know why? Because when the electricity goes out, the etchings are still on the fucking stone, but your blockchain is gone. Continuing. Your private key is yours. You never have to give that to anyone. They only ever see your public key when you request or send Bitcoin to other addresses. You can sign your Bitcoin in your wallet to show the world it indeed did come from you. If it's signed, it is you. The wallet is a piece of software that holds your private keys and makes it easier for the user to engage in the Bitcoin economy. That part is true. The miners can vote for or against upgrades in the Bitcoin code. Bitcoin miners check all new transactions and all others to ensure they are true with other miners and nodes. Bitcoin miners are rewarded by winning a lottery. No. It's kind of a lottery in that there is some randomness to it, but for the most part, it's based on your ability to get the block done first and get it retransmitted out to the rest of the network first. Anyway, continuing. This lottery is called a block. The block is a bundle of transactions which together get confirmed by miners. The lottery ticket block is sometimes won by a pool of people all putting their hashing power together to win the lotto and split the earnings. Miners use a lot of hardware and power to calculate these trillions of mathematical calculations per second to secure the blockchain. Actually, it used to be done by just one CPU, one vote. It was the simplest way to do it. It was also the way to avoid the ideal of a digital hierarchy where there would be certain performers, or certain miners rather, that would always get the block reward. Anyway, continuing on. Miners use a lot of hardware and power to calculate these trillions of mathematical calculations per second to secure the blockchain. This is called the hash rate. The higher the hash rate, the more secure the network becomes. Actually, no, that's not true. The higher the hash rate, the more participants are mining on the network. That's all it means. It doesn't make the network more secure. I mean, if over 50% of them are saying, no, we don't like the type of blockchain you want to make, then all of a sudden they could be taking over your Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency we're talking about with what is known as a 51% attack. Continuing on, the more secure the network becomes, the higher the hash rate, the more difficult it becomes to win a block. This is known as the difficulty. Actually, the difficulty is an adjustment made by the network, and it's made based on how many participants are involved in the network and how much hashing power is currently being dedicated to mining Bitcoin. And it adjusts, I think it's like once every 2 weeks or something like that. Anyway, continuing. The more secure the network becomes, the higher the hash rate, the more... That's all backwards. The higher the hash rate, the more secure the network becomes, and the more difficult it becomes to win the block. That's the way it really works. And no, that is not what is known as the difficulty. It is no coincidence that as difficulty in mining Bitcoin increases, the hashing power increases, and the new supply of Bitcoin decreases. That Bitcoin becomes even more valuable. It is supply and demand. Those who scream, quote, bubble, have no true grasp of economics. Actually, they do have some true grasp of economics, because we are talking about inflation, where with each block that gets validated and block reward issued, we are creating new coins, and this is what is known as inflation. However, it is a set distribution rate, and the reward itself is a set number. It does not change from one block to the next. And currently, I think it's 6.25 Bitcoin per block reward. And anyway, continuing on. Nodes can also vote for or against upgrades to the Bitcoin code. Full nodes check all transactions except for the new ones miners check. If miners chose to use their power like electricity to overpower the will of the user base, the users can override their vote with a user-activated soft fork. No, they can't. No, they can't. They can pollute the network with a series of transactions or a series of blocks that only they want to propagate. You know, that's like there's only a certain format that they're willing to acknowledge as legitimate. And so by propagating only those transactions to be included in blocks by miners, they try to force consensus changes, changes in the consensus rules. And the problem with that is that the miners are under no obligation to listen to them. So if they're saying, we're only going to be putting forward transactions that are according to the formats established by BIP9. If it's not a transaction that's compliant with the upgrades of BIP9, we're not going to propagate it. They can say that, but typically miners have their own nodes. So if they want to receive transactions that are not SegWit compliant or BIP9 compliant, they can. And the number of nodes can change very, very rapidly. This is another thing that people don't understand about the last quote-unquote user-activated soft fork, is that much of the nodes that were broadcasting their SegWit compliant transactions were in fact AWS instances and not users at all. So, yeah, there you go. I said it. Yes, there is politics in Bitcoin, except with Bitcoin, you can't have voter fraud. That's not true either. If you vote, it happened. The vote itself happened, but establishing who cast the vote, that's another thing entirely. Some competing cryptocurrencies have deployed a system known as proof of stake. There are many forms of POS, piece of shit, but generally they all operate as low energy consuming user nodes. This makes each and every crypto user their own bank. This makes Bitcoin digital oil, digital money, digital real estate, digital banking, and digital government. No, it doesn't. The blockchain is a history of which the winner of wars cannot rewrite. That's not true either. Imagine that. This is the very first history book which cannot be written by the victors. Yeah, again, that's not true. If they manage to bomb all of the places that have a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain, and they run all of the places that have their version of the Bitcoin blockchain, they in fact can rewrite history, baby. Continuing. Those who invest and risk early are rewarded compared to the old way, where it was, quote, he who killed and conquered enjoyed the spoils of war. No, it's still like that. It took centuries to convince people to accept paper over metals. It took people decades to have them accept plastic over paper. But I believe it will just be a few years to convince them to accept the digital blockchain. Which one? Which blockchain, dude? And I think I even sent that to this guy where I said, which blockchain are you talking about? There are literally thousands of them out there. Continuing. There are a lot of currencies that call themselves cryptocurrencies, yet have no blockchain. Dude, if it doesn't have a blockchain, it's not a cryptocurrency. Continuing. Some currencies are run by anonymous shadowy figures or internet trolls. Others have reversible blockchains and can delete people's wallet balances if they so wished. Yeah, you're talking about Accenture, not typically any quote-unquote trolls. Continuing. They may have their places in the marketplace and may rise or fall. It's up to you to put your money where it counts most, to you. Would I sell my only form of transportation to panic buy Bitcoin? Would I wait to buy a house to buy Bitcoin? Would I invest my life savings into Bitcoin? Probably not. But I wouldn't have a roof over my head, a form of transportation, or a life savings if it wasn't for a little investment here and there into cryptocurrency. Read Satoshi's white paper to gain clearer understanding of why he built Bitcoin. That's good. The real kicker is it's Bitcoin versus big bank crypto. Either Satoshi's decentralized principles, which gave birth to Bitcoin, wins, where no one can take your Bitcoin, or Fedcoin, which if/when you dissent, they can switch you off from engaging in commerce. Let's hope Bitcoin wins this battle. I have hope. I do too. But the thing is that I don't place all of my faith and trust in Bitcoin alone. And mostly it's because I don't have to. There are, in fact, a multitude of legitimate projects out there running right now that you can decide to join in an ad hoc fashion, meaning you can come and go as you please. And there is no entity out there that can tell you you can't. Unless, of course, it's a condition of that cryptocurrency, in which case you should probably invest in something that doesn't have that limitation. But that's the thing. Cryptocurrency really made a lot of these things optional. It said, do you really want to trust? I mean, you have an option now. If you don't trust that particular currency that's in your wallet, you know, if you're looking at it on a chart and you can see it falling off a cliff versus gold, silver, other commodities, you might want to consider Bitcoin as a potential hedge. where you could be stashing some of that monetary value and retaining it in a form that isn't evaporating very, very quickly against it. You know, it's funny that when people talk about inflation, I don't really hear them bitching about the fiat inflation going on out there. And it surprises me the most, especially people that espouse themselves as being Austrian economists and, you know, fully educated and shit like that, where they could be looking at cryptocurrency and saying that, you know, this doesn't have any value. Or that they could be saying that, you know, we are okay with using fractional reserves of this thing. You know, but they can say that all they want. It's not your obligation to follow what they're saying anymore. This is the big option that cryptocurrencies have made available to us, where we can start saying to ourselves, okay, well, you know, FedCoin, it looks pretty stable in that it's been around for about, I don't know, 2 centuries in some iteration or another, but, you know, ever since they went paper, they do this fractional reserve stuff, they debase it, and so on and so forth. Maybe I don't want to keep my money there anymore. You know, and I almost got to this earlier about the difference between Bitcoin and fiat currencies. And, you know, you'll hear people complain about the volatility of cryptocurrencies, except, of course, when it's going up and they happen to have some, then they're all for volatility. But what they don't talk about is the fiat side of that equation. What you must understand is that when you're looking at the quote-unquote price on a chart for Bitcoin, you're looking at the current exchange rate. I consider it to be a relationship between two separate currencies, two separate monies, currency units, that are run completely differently. With Bitcoin, again, we can talk about inflation with block rewards, but if the rate of new Bitcoin being issued is not exceeding demand, and as a matter of fact, demand just keeps going up for it and up for it and up for it versus the US dollar, of course, or other fiat currency. But we're not talking about why that is. We just talk about it and say, oh, you know, Bitcoin's volatile. No, Bitcoin is not volatile. The things that make a currency volatile are random issuance rates, where the issuer just waves a magic wand and creates 20 trillion of the fucking things, and is wholly unaccountable to anybody else for that issuance. That is quote-unquote volatile. That's what creates volatility, is because the rest of the market sees this big-ass flood of US dollars coming into it and saying, whoa, you know, I'm going to want a few more of those every time I give you a bar of gold, because you're issuing way too many of those, and I don't think you can back those obligations like you're saying. So I'm less confident with you issuing 20% of all of the Federal Reserve notes that have ever been issued in the last year. That's kind of concerning to me. You want to know why Bitcoin hit $64,000 after dropping all the way down to $3,000? It's because the Federal Reserve issued 20% of the Federal Reserve notes, or created 20% of the Federal Reserve notes that have ever been in existence in the last year. That's why. Now you're going to see some people taking profit and whatnot, but that you're looking at a reflection of actual fiat inflation. And this has been true for every single random issuance of Federal Reserve notes. If you look at the chart for Bitcoin from beginning to end, you can fucking point at each one of those space needles and say, oh, look, the Federal Reserve issued a few $1 billion right there. or a few $100 billion, or they did QE1. They did Operation Twist. They did QE2. They did QE3. They did QE4. They announced QE forever. Bitcoin jumped to fucking... It just shot up to $1,000. Mt. Gox collapsed. And of course, Bitcoin went back down to like $200. But that's beside the point. The point is, you can look at the chart. And I might be off on the relationship events there. I'm pretty sure... I want to say QE3 was Mt. Gox, where the two... And then QE Forever was the first time that we broke, I think it was 10,000. It was either 10,000 or 20,000 when they just said, we're just going to print money forever. No, I'm incorrect there. I'm pretty sure it was, in fact, it wasn't QE Forever. Yeah, it was QE Forever. When they announced QE Forever, that's when Bitcoin hit 1,000, and then Mt. Gox happened, and the hack happened, and that dropped Bitcoin back down again. But again, if you were to look at the date where the big-ass spike pinnacled, okay, and then go back to Google and look up Federal Reserve announcements for within a month or two of that period, and you will see it, plain as day, that they will be announcing it either before it happened or after it happened. And a lot of times it's after it happened, where the spike will happen and they will announce it thereafter. But the two events are very, very closely correlated, and you can see it on the Bitcoin chart of its price versus the US dollar and other fiat currencies. Anyway, it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. We will be back again on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And so as far as our last dance is concerned, I think we got just enough time. And there's some fucking zombie playing in the background, so we're just going to roll with it. White Zombie, Thunder Kiss, 1965, Last Dance, here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and y'all have an excellent evening. Good night.